Running an e-commerce business continues to get more complicated and more costly. The old days, when a web strategy was little more than a simple online shop, has morphed into a complex, hyper-competitive business model. Today's surging costs and few barriers to competitors have raised the stakes for e-commerce businesses. That's requiring new tools and new skills. Meet Matt Putra, CFO of 8x.co, which helps companies with that all-important financial forecasting, so that leadership can make more strategic decisions and gain control over their cash flows. He's helped e-commerce brands around the world scale their businesses and has created a financial model for a $750 million government fund concept. Today, Matt joins us on a seat at the table to discuss how e-commerce businesses can gain better control over their cash flow and preserve cash. He gives insider advice about negotiating with suppliers and financing strategies for e-commerce businesses. Having a strong financial plan is critical to the success of any business. However, it's also essential to have the right people who can execute on that plan and keep tight controls on your finances. Finding those first-rate financial managers is not that easy, especially with top talent being in big demand. That's why many leading enterprises and even medium-sized businesses look to AsiaNet consultants to help them recruit the right people for their finance departments. AsiaNet has decades of experience and a vast network that enables them to identify and reach out to talent that might otherwise not be accessible. You can learn more about AsiaNet consultants over at their website at asianetconsultants.com. I'll also leave a link for it in the show notes. Now let's sit down with Matt and find out how to get the financial side of our e-commerce business on a more profitable track. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us here on a seat at the table. I mean, e-commerce is such a big topic these days, and everybody jumped into e-commerce, of course, when things first got rolling, probably shortly after around the year 2000 or so, and then it really heated up during the pandemic. Everybody went all in on their e-commerce investment, and now we see people sitting there looking at e-commerce that's losing money, right? E-commerce was supposed to be the big cash cow for everybody, and now it's turned out to be the drag on the financial side of the business. And a lot of people who were running these big e-commerce businesses are trying to figure out, how do we fight our way out of this situation? And, it's a lot more than just getting rid of free returns. So I'm really looking forward to your views on this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So maybe we'll just get started by sharing some of your experience on how e-commerce can gain better control over their cash flows and ideally preserve some of that cash.
Yeah, and I mean, like I say all the time, I think that one of the number one things is to keep your fixed costs as low as possible. And I think a lot of the e-commerce companies that have, even the bigger ones that have had trouble, they were hiring, they were adding team members, they were spending out of control in the hopes of future profitability. And I've seen this with smaller businesses as well. So my advice to everybody is always, first and foremost, keep your fixed costs as low as possible, keep the team as lean as possible, which allows you then to have the room to spend more to acquire customers and then still make some profit on it as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think you're right. People just scaled up like mad. I mean, throughout the entire tech sector, right? I mean, we've just seen these massive layoffs that just keep coming in Silicon Valley, not just in e-com, but also in everything where people, are being laid off in droves. So
sure.
a big reversal of fortune, so to speak. Now, aside from, keeping your staffing tight, are there other things that you see companies overlooking, or things where you would focus their attention on in order to shore up that cash flow?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the marketing is obviously a huge cost for any e-commerce company, and there's a number of ways to sort of control your marketing spend, to communicate with your marketing agency such that they know what your goals are. And that's probably one of the second things that I would say to people is, make sure you have clear targets for your marketing agencies. Make sure you understand your break-even customer acquisition costs, your break-even ROAS numbers, return on ad spend numbers. Make sure you know how much contribution margin you'd like to be having when you get a sale, right? And when you kind of combine those things, you can set very clear targets for your agency. So one of the things that I like to do is have red, yellow, and green lights. Got the marketing spend. So if your target ROAS, if your current blended ROAS is above your target, the marketing agency can scale spend as much as they want, as much as is reasonable. If it starts to approach the target ROAS, they slow down the spend. Maybe they even keep it the same and see where they can normalize it to. If it goes below, they pull spend back by 20%, basically every day until they get back to the yellow and green zone. So I've made a couple sheets for this and everything, which I could send to you later. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the core ways is just to control marketing spend, to know what your breaking numbers are. And I mean, I guess in a way, what I'm saying is you have to really know your unit economics,
Right.
To run the business properly.
I think that's a really good point. First of all, I like that system of using a simple concept, right? Like that traffic light system of, red, green, and yellow to let people clearly see when they're, veering off the path.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Being able to have those tools in place is so important. And certainly customer acquisition has been another cost that's spiraled out of control.
Yes.
And you're right. Oftentimes people are driving traffic like crazy and they think that they're doing well. And then they find out that actually every sale is losing money.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen where people didn't know they were losing money on every first sale. I've also seen a situation where people didn't know they were making money on the first sale. And so they called me and they said, "Hey, we're having a hard time here. We're running out of cash." And I said, "Well, you're profitable at every first purchase, so that's infinitely scalable. You can remain profitable on the first purchase." So I said, "Spend more money," so they did, yeah, and it worked out.
Yeah, go figure. I mean, I guess that's everybody's dream, is to be able to make all
Yes.
those first purchases profitable.
Yes.
I think very few people are in that sweet spot just yet. But
Okay.
as you're pointing out, if you don't have that control over what you're doing, it becomes difficult.
Okay.
When you're looking at gaining that control, are there additional levers that you see adding into a business?
Yeah. I would like to, you want to institute daily, weekly, monthly reporting. So there's so many tools today that you can use, like Timely, Triple Whale, there's many more than that. And so what I want to be looking at on a daily, weekly basis is blended return on ad spend, contribution margin, daily sales, customers acquired, things like that. And it's because you need to have a really good view of what's actually happening. And then, of course, monthly, you have your financial statements. Within the month, estimate, of course. So, the first part of getting control is just knowing what's going on. And I'd find a lot of people don't even still review their reports with a fine-tooth comb. So that's one of the first things that we'll do when we're trying to help somebody. And then, next is really, once you know everything, what's happened, the next big piece of getting control is making the budget. And it forces you to think in the future and try to figure out what you really need, what you want. And then, from there you can, make the budget and then you report against your budget, which I'm sure you've done before, right? So you report against budget and you figure out where you missed and figure out where you were under and analyze what happened, right? And I found just the simple act of budgeting or forecasting really does make people think, because what you're doing then is you're going, well, instead of, we missed last month, it's like, we are going to miss next month. We're going to have a net loss in the future, 3 months in the future. And so then when they're hit with that, I find people are motivated to make some changes to things. And so that I find it's just looking at things, right? It's very powerful just to know what's going on, to look at it. And I would say for the average person with running their business, looking at financial reports is one of the last things they want to do. And so we even have just a coaching offer where we don't, it's much cheaper than everything else that we do, but we just get on the phone and look at the monthly report together. And then we have one other meeting in a month. But when we do that, they're sort of, it's like going to the gym. When you have a personal trainer, you're accountable to somebody, you're more likely to go. And so then we come in as that sort of finance personal trainer in that regard.
That's a fabulous idea. And I think that any business could use that. Even if you have a huge team, having an outside person bringing that third party point of view can be massive. And certainly if you're a small business, that's got to really be game changing to be able to have somebody who, like you say, once a month or whatever frequency you choose, can sit down and go over things with you and point out things that you might have overlooked, especially if your head isn't 100% in finance, particularly as it might be if you are, in a leadership role in a
It's
smaller business. So I think that's something that a lot of people might want to consider.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, again, it's the third party set of eyes. It's the someone from the outside taking a look, right? And then it's the accountability. Yes, I have finance training, but a large part of it is just looking at something with fresh eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All the training in the world is only valuable to a point. When you have someone who's looked at
Yes,
many, many different sheets for multiple
yes,
companies, they can also give you that, I would imagine, and I'm not trying to speak with more authority than yourself because you're the expert
no,
on
of
this,
course,
but I would imagine that if you're sitting there looking at these kind of financial statements for many companies, you then
sure.
bring something extra to the company that you're looking at because you have benchmarks and things that you're seeing other
Yes,
people doing. And so something that may either look very good or very bad for one particular company, you might be able to say, well, in perspective, actually, it's
yes,
like
of course,
this.
absolutely. And it sounds a bit like what you do with your research and your analysts, right? That you get that wide industry view. And it's, yeah, very similar with us. So, we've worked with maybe 30, 40 e-commerce companies. And so we have a pretty good idea of what your cost structure should look like. Pretty good idea what the optimal structure should look like. So we've seen the best, we've seen, some of the not so good ones too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think every company suffers from that, even these massive enterprises, and aside from small
Mhm.
business as well, is you become circular in your thought pattern because the only
Absolutely.
conversations you have are either internal or with your specific customers. So that limits it to, it's a very small subset. So I think that it's interesting that you're bringing this up. Now, you talk about negotiating better with suppliers. I think that's also
Mhm.
interesting. And a lot of times you don't think about that when you're thinking about running e-commerce. Can you talk about that a bit? What do you see happening?
Yeah, of course. And so, the other thing, we talk about cash flow management, there's a metric that I like to measure called the cash conversion cycle. And in theory, basically what you're doing is you're trying to figure out if I pay my supplier today, how long does it take for me to get the money back from customers, right? And so if that's could be 60 days, 120 days, whatever it is for you. Um, when I ask people to negotiate with their suppliers, what I'm asking people to do typically is try to pay less or pay later. Those are the two kind of big ones with your suppliers. So what you can do is if you have someone that's a good partner, I mean, right now you're not going to get really paid less just because of inflation in the global economy and whatnot. But in other times you can sometimes get to pay less if you trade off the volumes. But the big one is pay later. So a lot of e-commerce companies, especially if they're sourcing from overseas or offshore, they will have a decently large deposit they have to pay, and then they have to pay the whole balance before the item ship. And what I tell people is do little negotiations at a time. So don't go in and say, hey, can we have no more deposit? And can we have net 30 terms? That's a very, very large ask.
Yes.
What I would suggest people do is come in and say, instead of a 30% deposit, can I pay a 25% deposit? And in doing that, you're positively affecting your cash conversion cycle, meaning it could be going 75 to even 70 days, which is a big difference.
Yes.
Um, and when you do that, your suppliers are more likely to accept. you're more likely to get traction. You can then prove that you're going to pay them and everything's going to work on those terms. And then the next conversation we have is, hey, instead of paying right before we ship, can I pay when it lands on my shore? And so then again, now you're saving yourself about anywhere from 2 weeks to a month of payments there. And in some cases, they may not take it, but if they do, again, it's a smaller ask. They're more likely to accept. And you have, change your cash conversion cycle again. Maybe now it's 65 days to 60 days. And I'll tell you, for a company doing, if a company's doing $4 million, a change of 5 days less in your cash conversion cycle could be around $200,000 in extra cash at the end of the year. So it's significant, and it's very small changes we need to make. By way of example, a supplier that I work with, one of these companies, I asked them, could I have an additional 30 days to pay, and I'll pay you 1% extra on their invoices, like a financing charge. They emailed me back in 2 hours and said yes.
Wow.
These really big suppliers, they don't have a lot of ways to make like extra money very easily because they're so big. So this deal they'll take all day long. And so now I have net 60 days with the supplier. So yeah, be talking to suppliers. Make the word I use is nibbles. I was introduced to this word by a really good friend of mine, nibbles. So ask for nibbles from your supplier, small things, and do it regularly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's something that, like you say, is a simple thing to do, but you don't think about that because most people think about going in for that big ask, and that makes the supplier uncomfortable, particularly at any time other than when business is booming. But
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It gives the e-commerce site more time to actually sell those goods and raise cash. But now with interest rates being so high, financing inventory is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. And it's tough to even get financing right now. A lot of the financing, lenders that were pretty cavalier last year have really tightened things up. For example, there was a post going on LinkedIn just a few days ago where somebody's Jeeves credit limit got shut down completely.
Oh, really?
With no notice. Yeah, and so I don't know what the limit was or anything, but they had access to capital. Jeeves shut it off with zero notice. Someone else, even with good payment history, their limit got cut in half.
Wow.
And so what we're seeing is lenders are just tightening across the board. They're relatively worried about their existing portfolios because they've probably overlent in the past. And so it can be hard to even find money right now. So then, I would say everybody break even as fast as you can, and start working on this cash conversion.
I think that's a really, really good point because, of course, we all know that interest rates have gone up significantly in a short time, and everybody knew that having zero interest rates were unrealistic, and certainly for as long as they were. So people knew something was going to change, but I think most people didn't think it was going to change as quickly. How, aside from people being shut down on credit, what impact are these increased interest rates having on the financial side of e-commerce? We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree? Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, I would say that on a P&L effect, it's not as significant as one would think.
Okay.
Because when you're looking at interest, when you have a small loan and you're paying, interest rates go from, call it maybe 10 to 20%, let's say, the P&L effect isn't as large as you would think. The larger problem is the cash flow because lenders are putting out money for less time.
Right.
So the term is instead of 24 months, it's 12 months, or they're giving you less money, or the payments are now higher. So that's where I would see that the majority of the negative effect is in the cash flows, just less availability, and you have to pay it back faster. And so then you have to redraw if you can redraw, right? So that's really the problem. And so one of the things that I've been advising to do is talk to a company called Sellers Buy. They are still doing term loans. Now, again, they're being more careful too, but they're doing term loans between 12 and 18 months, some of the better terms you get in e-commerce. But I think everybody should have a term loan as part of their sort of inventory-based financing. A lot of people love lines of credit. Banks love them too. But like we see with Jeeves, they can be shut off at any moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a very scary scenario for e-commerce, particularly for companies that are pure players. I think that for people who have a physical retail presence, you probably are a little more solid at the moment. I don't know if you see that as the case.
I don't actually work with anybody that has a physical store.
Oh, okay.
Maybe only one person, but for the companies that have physical locations that I work with, they're typically they're for testing or kind of a trial, less so a core part of their business.
Okay. Well, I just think that, these changes have come upon us so quickly that a lot of companies are probably blindsided by these rapid changes. I mean, like you say, financing is drying up, venture capital is drying up. The level of competition in e-commerce has heated up.
Right.
So you're really getting hit on all sides. From your point of view, then, what do you see as the optimal strategy then for someone from the financial point of view, for someone who's running an e-commerce operation? What are you advising CFOs?
Yeah. Really the goal has to be to break even and make money as fast as you can. There's a variety of ways to do that. We've talked a bit about suppliers. We've talked a bit about managing marketing spend. Beyond that, one of the things that I'm strongly suggesting to most people I talk to is think about the global workforce. This is something that I think, Westerners, maybe even Europe, are less comfortable with. But my team is basically mostly global. And the talent that we have on our team, they're brilliant. They're motivated. Best I could hope for from a team. And so, and I've actually done a competitive research on a 9-figure brand recently, and of their sort of 60 team members, more than half are in the Philippines.
Okay.
Including some of the directors from their team. So that's the big one, is consider global workforce when you're looking for a new role or when you're building a team. And in some cases, some people need to downsize their team or shift things more globally, because again, there's exchange benefits, and typically you can find talent for 1/3 to 1/2 what you pay North American or European, but the talent is just unbelievable. You just have to know how to find it, and so that's something that we do as well, as we help with recruiting for global talent. But that's a really big one, because again, marketing is the single biggest expense.
Right.
Wages is usually number 2. Yeah, and so just you have to optimize that and just think about it in a new way. And from there, really the way to grow the business, way to turn things around, is you just have to get customers in the door. And so I would suggest, people follow the brightest marketing minds that are kind of out there, talking about Jordan West, Taylor Holiday, Jim Keen, find all these guys on LinkedIn, read their stuff every day, and do the things that they're saying. And again, you just have to find ways to reach your audience when everyone else is trying to reach the same audience. And so there's just a lot of things, a lot of tactics you can try, but you have to be trying them. You have to be trying these things.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that nobody wants to try new things because it's
Oh,
hard enough to get something set up and running to begin with. When times are unstable, the last thing you want to do is, right, have a lot of moving parts. But
right, right.
I think you're 100% correct. And I hear this from a lot of, sort of the great leaders across many different disciplines, not just finance, who are saying if
Mhm.
you don't start trying new things, you're not really going to survive.
100%. I put a post on LinkedIn yesterday, the day before, and I just said, like, if you iterate forever, you'll die.
Right,
Iterating
right.
is only going to make you better to a certain point. Then the law of diminishing returns kicks in, and at some point, you have to do something new and fresh to continue growing your brand, your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at 8X.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we're a team of CFOs. We help people kind of just navigate, and we build a plan for them. And so basically, uh, 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 somebody wants to get to their goal. My job at its core is to make sure they have the resources they need to get there. Um, we have when we start with somebody, the first thing that we do is we build a financial forecast, and we're trying to understand what is the potential of the business. There was a case where I did this for somebody, and I told them, this is not going to work. Your business is going to go bankrupt unless we change the model. So that's one of the reasons we start there. Can the business even work as it stands today? And after answering that question, it's sort of yes, no, maybe. And from there, we're shoring up weaknesses. We're communicating with marketing agencies a little better. We're making plans to improve cash flow. We're helping them negotiate with suppliers. We're helping them understand what their team structure should look like. Sometimes we're helping them find new contractors or new agencies, depending on what their needs are. Um, and obviously, daily, weekly, monthly reporting, and planning. And I mean, a large part of what we do is coaching as well. So you're seeing this in your ad account, you're seeing this in the market, you're seeing this in your supplier. What does it mean to you, and how can you use the information more effectively? Um, yeah, I mean, our tagline is more cash and less stress. We want to help you run your business with more cash and less stress. And so for the most part, we were successful in doing that. And one of the ways we see the stress fall away is just by knowing what you have in front of you. So again, that's where the model comes in. This is what your business looks like on paper. This is the net profit. These are the cash needs. And just knowing helps people sleep a little bit better. And then, of course, fixing it in the model as well is helps people sleep better. So that's what we do. We have multidisciplinary team. We have somebody that used to be an Indochino, early employee Indochino. We have a guy that was an industrial engineer who's now a finance person. We have someone that worked for AIG Global, and we're actively looking for supply chain people. We have actually a rocket scientist that we consult with. And yeah. It's just, this comes back to you can't iterate forever. You have to think about something new. And that's why we found this astrophysicist, and we just talked to him here and there about things just to get his input.
Yeah, I think that's really remarkable. And I totally agree with you. The benefits of having that sort of brain trust, so to speak, that
Mm-hmm.
can share that point of view that brings so much different
Yes,
expertise to the table. It's really invaluable. Now, I think a lot of people would love to be able to connect with you. And I think a lot of
sure.
people listening to this may have their own questions that are specific to their business. How can people reach you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, and LinkedIn is a really great way to connect.
Okay.
So just look for Matt Putra on LinkedIn, MATTPUTRA. And I post very regularly. I also talk with people in DMs or comments. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, that's a great place to start. You can just kind of see what I put out there, and if something catches your eye, we can interact and ask questions, whatever you like. Of course, you can go to my website, www.8x.co, eighcx.co. Website's not very good, but it's currently we're doing a redesign there. Those are the two main ways. You'll find my email from the website. You'll find my email from LinkedIn. Those are the best ways.
Well, that's great. And I'm going to make sure all of those links are in the show notes. And
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you so much for joining us here on A Seat at the Table. I've learned a tremendous amount just from what you've said during this conversation. So I'm sure everybody listening has too.
Thank you so much. It was really an honor to be here.